Jackie. If you want to introduce yourself, we'll get kicked off here.
Okay, my name is Jackie Berry. I own a company called Community Association Data Source, and we review homeowner association documents for civil code compliance. The Davis Sterling is the business operational laws that associations, all of them, regardless of what size they are right now. I get calls all the time. Well, we're only 6 units. Why do we have to follow the Davis Sterling? Well, there's two schools of thought. One, it is a condominium. You are taking care of business for the ownership, and they have a say-so in how it's managed, but the law is the bottom line. That's how you have to operate. And the big problem with that is that sometimes it's very bulky and people figure, well, we don't want to do that. Well, if they don't want to, there is this level we all know about, which is called risk factors. If we're willing to take the risk, you do it whatever way you want. It's that day that that homeowner gets smart or all of a sudden sues the board of directors for non-performance of their fiduciary duties. And that's one of the little videos that I'm going to show you this morning, because this seems to be coming up more and more all the time. I had one the other day. It's 8 units, and the board of directors says, well, we don't operate under the Davis Sterling, and our attorney told us we didn't have to. And I said, that's fine, as long as you've got a letter in place that he's told you that you do not have to follow the Davis Sterling, and you've made that decision and that risk, because it's very clear in your CC&Rs that says that you're part of the Davis Sterling Act. And so in any case, that's kind of just a heads up. It is very confusing because these small associations are very short on the amounts of people and who will help to produce and operate these corporations. Remember, they're operating a multi-million-dollar corporation. When you're listing in a homeowner association, you're listing a multi-million-dollar corporation that's attached to that home. You know what the home is. You know when you walk through that front door exactly what is part of what you're selling. And then there's the different styles of ownership. And I just kind of want to go through those first. And then I'm going to have our wonderful Jody Vanna give us that. Maybe we do that first. It'll tell us why are these condominium or the associations themselves, whether it's a condo or a PUD, why are they in place? So let's just do it. It's a 2 minute, just under 3 minutes.
Which one are we doing?
The very first one is
Why they exist. Okay.
yeah, why do they exist?
All right. Give me a second. Let me share my screen.
The purpose of an association. The defining element of a common interest development is that buyers own a separate interest, a unit or lot, coupled with an interest in the common areas. Because there are elements owned in common by members, someone must take care of them. Under the Davis Sterling Act, the common areas must be managed by a private membership organization, commonly referred to as a homeowners association, community association, property owners association, or owners association. Membership in the association is automatic when a person buys into the development. The association manages the development through a board of directors elected annually by the membership. The bylaws outline how directors are elected, their term in office, and their duties. In most associations, day-to-day operations are delegated to a management company or an on-site manager and staff. The primary duty of an association is to preserve property values by maintaining, repairing, and replacing common areas. In a condominium development, it means all structures and amenities. In a gated plan development, it's streets, greenbelts, and amenities such as a clubhouse. In addition, associations regulate architectural designs in a community. Secondarily, an association adopts rules and regulations so members can enjoy their property in peace without interference by other members. That means regulating pets, parking, and nuisances such as noise and smoke, and addressing disputes in the community. To enforce its restrictions, associations can impose fines, suspend privileges, and file lawsuits. An important service provided by associations is security. While they can't guarantee it, most associations provide a reasonable level of privacy and security for their members. To pay for operations, associations adopt annual budgets and levy assessments. Members who don't pay their assessments are subject to enforcement that can result in money judgment against the owner and/or foreclosure of their home. Because of these benefits, homeowner associations have grown in popularity with a large and growing percentage of households in the nation now living in common interest developments.
Great. Thank you for joining us today. You now know everything you need to know about homeowner associations. So this is kind of a heads up. I have been using the Davis Sterling website now for many, many years. I'm on it several times a day because it has so much information that I need to impart when I get a phone call. So I will provide Jody with the website, but it's very simple. It's just Davis, D-A-V-I-S dash Sterling, STIRLING.com.
And it's in the chat box, and I'll put it in the chat box as we go through as well.
Yeah, because that you can quickly find information. You can also call me. That is a lot that people do. But this is everything you need to know. Now we talk about the different styles of ownership. Everybody says, oh, I'm selling a townhouse. Well, is that townhouse a condominium or is it a planned unit development? In a condominium, you own the walls in, the floors up, the ceiling down, airspace. If it's a planned unit development, then you own the land underneath the building and the structure as well as the interior. So there are different reasons for different types of maintenance that are on the property itself. So what I always tell the agents is, look, for those of you who have worked for me, I know you worked with me, you know that I ask this question is, tell me what kind of property it is. Is it a condo or a PUD? Well, it's a townhouse. And I go, well, that's our structure. Let's go to the preliminary title report. Go to the description on the property, and it will say the words unit. That means it's a condominium, airspace only. And if it says lot, it is always a planned unit development. Now, just because you know what kinds of property you own does not have anything to do with who's responsible for the maintenance part of the structures. Even in planned unit developments, in most instances, when they're townhouse, row houses, whatever you want to acknowledge them as, the association is responsible for maintenance generally of the exteriors, roofs, anything that cannot be done as an individual. Single family houses on planned unit developments is what we usually think of, gated communities, large lots, that type of thing. That's a different story because then you really do have a separate entity and you're able to do the maintenance. They give you guidelines as to how you have to do that. But in a townhome, that you still need to go to your budget as well as the CC&Rs to find out who's responsible. I always get, well, who's responsible for termites? Well, my story is that termites eat 365, 24/7. And they don't care whether it's a condo or a PUD. So who's going to pay for it? The owners end up paying for it. You cannot separate the ownership from who's going to pay. Everybody gets to pay. And so you have to take a look at that. If the association is doing it, let's say you have 4 units that are attached and you have to tent that building, it would be very difficult to do one and not do the others. So that is something. And there's not generally a budgeted line item for doing the termites or dry rot unless it's a condominium. And then they generally will have a line item on their budget. Still, everybody has this misnomer. The only place that the money can come from are the owners. So regardless if you're a townhouse, a condo, a single family, whatever, know that when something has to get repaired, if there's not money in the reserves, they will be doing special assessments to cover those costs. And so right here, I would just like to say, is there any questions relating to where we are right now, that we know what we're actually getting ready to list or purchase for our clients, with our clients?
I don't think yet. There are some questions in the chat box, but we're gonna wait on those just for a couple minutes.
Great, okay. So the next part of this is whether or not they have any money. My greatest story is I had a lady who purchased, and her brother had worked with me for many years. And so he goes, she doesn't want to pay for the report, but I think I can do it. So he did. And he was very smart. He went back to the board because it was a condominium, and he asked for a letter from the board of directors that they were responsible for the termites. Her particular unit was an end unit, it had a deck on pillars on 3 sides of her unit. So she was very excited about this and lived in this gorgeous area in Los Altos. And so she goes to the board meeting and she goes, I want to schedule the date for my replacement of my decking around my unit, because I'm going to have an open house for my friends, and I just wanted to be able to get that done. And they said, honey, we said we were responsible, not that we had any money. So it's not just as easy as it seems. If the association is responsible, they may be responsible, but they're supposed to provide a pro forma operating budget. And a lot of times the smaller ones, I'm getting 1-pagers, or they might have 2 pages to it. But generally, there is 16 different questions that the pro forma operating budget is required under the Davis Sterling to tell everyone. And one of those things is about the reserves. There should have been a reserve study. That's an outside service by most people's, the board of directors does hire an outside service, but some of them like to take their coffee on a Saturday morning and their donuts, walk around and say, well, Susie didn't tell us that she had a roof leak, so we're good here, and they move to the next unit. That's no longer feasible because of the new state mandate. This is on condominiums only that we're going to talk about. You can have 2 buildings sitting right next to each other. One is a townhouse, the other is a condominium. And the townhouse is, the owners are responsible for their balconies. However, in a condominium, the association is. The state mandate, it came out in 2020 and said associations must now do physical destructive testing on each and every single balcony that is, coming off. It's a chandelier type balcony or walkways or landings that are in these units, to verify that there's no water intrusion and dry rot that has accumulated. Because some of you might remember several years ago, we had a balcony that went down off in Berkeley, and several people lost their lives. So that was part of it. And then of course the building going down in Florida didn't help anything. And so everybody is all of a sudden in a state of panic, and they come up with these new regulations. So the mandate is that any condominium, not the townhouses, even though the townhouses are going to have the same issue, they could be the same age. I've got a project to like that. But the problem is that the people that are in the townhouse, which own their unit and the building, they're going to have the same inspection requirements as the condos. As agents, you're going to have to start looking at that. If there are balconies and decks and it is a planned development, you need to ask them. It's another report that you're going to have to get, because they're going to have to repair the damage if there is any. And they'll have to have also the engineers or contractors that are doing these inspections have to give them a report that says that it's clear of any issues. If it's not, the work has to be done before you can close that escrow. That started in 2020. They had until January 1st, 2025 to get the inspections done. You will see that a lot of the condominiums have not done those yet. They are postponing them. You can see it in their minutes, but they are getting closer and closer. there are very few of the engineering and the general contractors that are licensed and bonded be able to do these inspections and the reports. So it's going to be similar to a termite report, a home warranty report, but it will have to start being done. And you're going to start seeing that, I think, at the beginning of this coming year, because that'll be 2023 and it'll be 2 years out before it's actually just one more year. So take a look at that, ask that question. If you're listing or purchasing, do they have a plan in place? And do they have money set aside? What most of them are doing, any items that are not in the system that are showing that they're collecting money for it on an ongoing basis are done through special assessments. Special assessments are very, very dangerous right now because we're selling properties, and even in your jumbo loan, the lenders are taking a look at whether or not there is a loan, and they want those loans paid off by the seller, which is the best idea anyway, if there's one in place. If there's not, then sooner or later, your buyers will be picking up that tab to get that inspection. So they should be forewarned that that could be coming down the pipe. This is one of my pet peeves because everybody is sitting on their hands, and the managers don't want to even have to think about it, because then they have to get, not only do they have to oversee the engineers, but then they have to get a construction manager to be able to rebuild those units. I had one about 6 months ago that ended up costing $58,000 per deck. It was over a $12 million job that they had to go out and get a bank loan. And they did, but now the people are paying that off and their assessments are relatively high. The big thing that I have, and my pet peeve comes from the fact that the managers are sticking that in the payment on the loan in the reserves. It's not a component. It should have its own separate line item according to every one of the CPAs that I've talked to, but it's hidden and you may not see it. So you're going to want to take a real close look if you're looking at those documents on your own. If we're doing it, we will dig that piece of information out. If it's not there, we will request it to be received, because this is the biggest thing that we're doing is we're trying to tell our buyers that what their risk in purchasing in this multi-million-dollar corporation is. It may look great. There's a project, I'm not going to tell you which one it is because I know most of you will know it, but they've been painting over their dry rot for absolutely years. And a lady a few months back called me and she goes, my inspector went over and he went to turn on the water faucet outside to see that it was working. He was just checking little things. She goes, he's a real bug for that kind of stuff. And I go, great, what happened? She goes, the whole wall collapsed around it because they've been painting. And the explanation of the particular board member was, well, we thought that the paint would help act as glue to hold it together a little while longer. So some of them are really funny, the explanations, but what I want you to know is that there's so much more in selling a condominium or a planned development. There are 55,000 associations in the state of California. 80% of all new construction is going to be in condominiums, not planned developments, but condominiums. And that's because the cities have some sort of blight, not quite, or blight properties in downtown or the very close surroundings. They're going to let developers come in and build 4 to 6 story, maybe 8-story complexes, making them condominiums with lots of amenities. And because they're going to get lots of taxes on that, and it's going to be right downtown so that they can access all of the things that are there. And the cities are going to be very excited about allowing those kinds of properties to be converted into high-rise or mid-rise type associations. So take a look at that, because we are starting to see that now. And that is a quarter of our housing market. So they're not going away. We used to think they might self-destruct and disappear, but the type of ownership is where almost everybody is having to move to that doesn't have millions and millions of dollars to buy those single family residences. And even some of them are in associations that have clubhouses, lakes, swimming pools, tennis courts, all kinds of different amenities. So regardless if it's a planned unit development or a condominium, it falls under the CID, common interest development is the general term that is used for all types of properties that are owned in common. The other thing I'm recommending to the real estate agents is when you put your person and your clients into contract, recommend to them that they go over on the weekend and take a nice stroll through the common areas and see the activity that's going on. You might even want to do that also, because that's when you can see if there's a lot of things going on, if you can see whether you really look at the buildings. Are they very well maintained? Are they, is it painted? Do they have balconies? Then the question, of course, would come up is, did they do their inspection? So those are the kinds of things that we're starting to experience. Lenders are not loaning in some of the projects, and there's a couple of pieces of criteria that I will give you. Whether it's a conforming loan or a jumbo loan makes absolutely no difference. On the conforming loans, those are generally in a price range that people are putting almost all that they have down on that property. And if they get hit with a special assessment, that could be, I think my phone is ringing up. Turn it on. If they find that they're in that kind of a situation, then my brain just took a dive. Turn my phone off. How funny. So we're looking at the lenders and how they're doing, looking at their loans. If you're in I'm going to talk about the conforming loans, because those are the ones that our clients are going to have a harder time if the dues are raised, also called assessments. But if those go up, then or there's special assessments, they're going to be the ones that are going to be affected. Lenders are, if there's 20% or more down on that loan, they're not as concerned with the association, even though they will have a form that goes out. It's anywhere from 3 to 7 pages long. And that is definitely a daunting issue. Most management companies have been told by their attorneys not to fill out the questions that are relating to the structures and whether or not there's damage. It asks questions like, have you been yellow tagged by any city or county? Different things of that nature. But there are some questions that the managers have been told do not answer. And I've seen that the lenders have changed their form, because I get a lot of the forms to complete. So if they have to fill out the form and it goes to that lender, and that lender does not like the fact that you don't have enough money or you're putting all of your money into it, and what your debt ratio is, that's what your client's debt ratio is. Those are the things they're looking at more than the association. If they're putting under 20%, they're looking at the association, because they do know that at that level, there is a big possibility that there will be special assessments that will seriously harm the buyer. They won't be able to afford to be able to pay those special assessments. Special assessments can be done down and dirty, like the $10 million one. They got a 15-year loan. So for 15 years, they had the option of either paying it up front or paying it over the period of time. If they bought into the loan payment, they did make a resolution on this one that if you sold your property, that loan payment had to be paid off. Loan payments are not assumable by the buyer unless explicitly allowable by the association. So if you have one that's got a special assessment on it, you need to make sure that that gets paid off at the close of escrow. We're in a market that isn't quite as crazy as it was a few months ago, where people were paying all cash or whatever to get into the property. We did have a couple of people that paid all cash, thinking they could go in and then refinance and get their money back out. That didn't happen because the lender would not allow it if they had a loan. This one had a big loan on it. Even though their portion got paid off, the loan still was large enough that the lenders were not happy about them getting into it. So lenders are looking for their risk. They want to sell it on the secondary market, so they're going to be looking at all those little pieces. So you're not only, and even if you sell them all cash, we had an investor that paid all cash for a project, went in, spent something like $35,000-$40,000 to refurbish the interior, and then went to sell it and found out they couldn't sell it because the association had a big bank loan. And so that is some of the stuff that you have to be conscious of. So whether it's an investor or not. One of the things that came up the last couple of years is the rental restriction. Rental restrictions in 2020 went into place, and it said that the board of directors of a condominium or a planned development had to restate their governing documents to cover the new rules. And the rule now is they have, some of them you would see that we only allow 15% of renters in here. That's no longer allowable. They have to allow a minimum of 15 or 25% of the units to be able to be rented, regardless of the size of the project.
So Jackie, there's a question I think that goes, Sandra asked a question. I think this goes along that. Can you go over the risk assessment for lending and refi as the owner occupied percentage approaches a level below 50%?
Great, that's a good one. Okay, so if it's below 50%, you're fine. If it goes over 50%, we got a little bit of a problem. Lenders are not making loans on investment properties generally. However, when this came about, real estate agents were very excited about it because the minimum that could be rented was 25%. They said that the board of directors had the right to make a cap of, let's say, 30 or 40% of them could be rented. The minute you get into that 30 and over percentage, the lenders are going to start looking at it as there's more renters here than there are owners, and it's harder to control. Boards of directors are volunteers. It takes a lot more because most of the time when investors invest in these kinds of properties, because the value is there, they can get into these properties for less money. But the problem is they kind of leave it, and the board ends up with their management company spending a lot of time enforcing rules and educating their tenants and things like that. The minute you get into that 45 to 50% and over rentals, you have a problem with lenders. I said I would never get back into the property management business, but I am now a proud owner of a small division that only handles units under 50, well, it's usually 50 or under units. And I have a project in San Francisco that is 38 units. It's a 5-story building, brand new construction. And I call it the Gemini because we have 50% are rented and 50% are going to be owner occupied. They're up for sale right now. And they had to find lenders that would loan in that project based on those criteria. So that was a very difficult thing. And you want to be real careful. You want to know what that percentage is. A lot of times they're going to tell you offsite addresses, which is fine because the lenders will accept that. But if you're getting up into the 30 or 40%, it is an investor issue, and the risks are that the association, most of the time, the investors will not raise the dues or vote for special assessments. Some of them do, some of them, the majority we are finding do not want to have to pay more money. So they can't get it out of the rent, and then they're underwater at some level or another. So be cautious about that. And you will find that I would say the biggest majority of the lenders are trying to sell to Freddie or Fannie, and you have to sell under their guidelines, and they don't like projects that are mostly rentals when it's a residential ownership type of a property. Anything else on that we might need to go
not on that one, but I can go into some of the questions that are on here.
All righty, let's do that.
All right, I'm just going to kind of go in order here. How long can a condo with over 200 units go without an annual meeting? Can all the votes be done by proxy without any homeowners assistance or even a general meeting even on Zoom?
Just had this conversation with the developer on the building in San Francisco. Okay, so you have to go to the bylaws. I have never seen a set of bylaws that allows an association not to have an annual meeting and an election. The election procedures have to be under the new guidelines, and you will be able to find those on that Davis Sterling website. But you take the bylaws and you go into it, and they have to have amended their governing documents to be in compliance with the new law that went into effect in 2021. So you want to make sure that that's happened. They have to have an annual meeting and an election. If they don't, then there could be a group of homeowners or a homeowner that would request that through the board of directors, say, based on our bylaws and or the civil code, you are required to have an election. Sometimes they just, well, we can't get anybody to run. We can't get anybody to join the board. We can't get anybody to do any of these jobs. They have to try. Sometimes when they get a board and they only have, let's say they have 5 positions and 3 of them are up for a vote, if they get 3 people who will run for those positions, they can do that by mandate. And so they don't have to worry about holding an actual election. But the election rules are extremely stringent and very costly to operate. There's a procedure by which they have to follow, and sometimes the smaller projects don't want to follow the law, so they have a little more of a problem, but they must have, their bylaws will tell them how many times they have to meet a year. There is a law that says that the board of directors, each board member will get 6 different financial documents every single month. They must review those, and they should have at least quarterly meetings to be able to ratify those financials. Say, we looked at them, we understand them, we have no questions about them, we approve them. They can also put together a committee to do that, but that's it is very important that you have a board of directors and that the owners also have access to those financials. Open meetings, all meetings must be open except for executive session. There are only certain things that you can take care of in executive session: reviewing contracts, disciplinary action, foreclosure and collection issues. Everything else has to be done in open meeting. If you do have an executive session, anything that was discussed and approved must be put in the next set of minutes. So there are some very stringent guidelines on that, because there are times where I have a project that they've had the same board for 10 years. Well, some of the people don't like that, but nobody wants to run for the board. So it's kind of a catch-22, but they, according to their bylaws, and if the bylaws are not updated, they have to go by the current law, and that you will find again on the Davis Sterling Act, I said. And there's even a little video. The video that I showed you, they've got several of them on different things. We could go through, there is, I think the one that we did on the board of directors, if you think that we would like to do that. Let's see what our time is. We've got an hour today, right? Let's show the one on the board of directors, because that is really good, and that answers this question. Plus, it'll open up the door for your thinking when you're looking at a project that doesn't have a board.
Okay, I'm gonna pull it up.
Okay.
While I'm doing that, we'll do the next question. What percentage funded would you say is reasonable for HOAs, for HOA funds?
Well, you can't really go by that. Really, the percentage funded is a calculation based on a reserve study, which is a physical inspection or visual inspection, not a physical one, where they're digging in and looking at to see if there's any dry rot. Although the reserve study companies now are identifying where they see water spots, so that the board of directors can then have an engineering company come out to do their inspections. when they do the reserve study, they list every component that the association is responsible to do, to maintain, what its life expectancy is and how many years it's already been in use. And they give you a number. Then you calculate all of those numbers up. There is a document generally in there called the Assessment Reserve Funding Schedule. That's part of your budget that will tell you how much is supposed to be in there based on the last reserve study. Reserve studies have to be done physical inspections every 3 years, and they have to update those numbers every year with work that they have done the previous year. So the percentage funded is calculated by that reserve study. You want to make sure that it's a current one. I have one right now that they keep telling me, well, the last one we did was 2017. I said, well, those numbers are a little bit old, and you're saying, so I'm assuming that you're seriously underfunded because you don't have any of the numbers that you can show that. So, okay, so then once you get the numbers on the reserve by a reserve study company in a timely manner, updated when necessary every year with any work that was done the previous year, you then have to go to a balance sheet or a year-end financial. A balance sheet gives you a current balance, which is unaudited, that says this is how much we have in reserves. So you take that number that says this is what we need $1 million, and we've got 200,000 in the bank. You subtract the two and divide it by the number of units, it will tell you what the dollar amount. The percentage amount is kind of what I call a false wall. So you don't want to just use that. You want to know what is the dollar number to your client? What are they going to be paying? CAR got the bill passed that the associations had to do these reserves and to identify how much is supposed to be in the reserves and how much they have, because they were having every budget they got in the several years ago would say we're 100% funded, no problem. But then they found out that they were getting pulled into lawsuits all the time. And what they found out is they forgot the words this year. And so by not putting in this year, it was very definitely a facade. And then these people would get these large special assessments. So I had a lady that bought a condominium in December of last year, and in May, she got a bill for $38,000 for a special assessment. And the board said that they were financially healthy in the verbal that they gave her. Oh yeah, we've got plenty of money, because they had almost $1 million, but they needed $4 million. And then when it came time, they had to do the special assessment. So take the number of the value of the difference between what the reserve study, current reserve study says they're supposed to have and what they actually do have. And if there's a deficit, when CAR got the bill passed that said, we won't want to know on the cash flow because you kept telling us you were 100% funded when you forgot the words this year, it's called the accrual basis. So they calculate it based at the time they start the budget. And that tells you what the percentage funded is, and you should be able to calculate what it is per door. They wanted that because the value of the property is directly related to the value of the reserves. So that's negotiable between the buyer and the seller. In the market we're just coming out of, everybody was so excited, they went out and paid $300,000-$400,000 more than list price just to get first in line. And so it set them up that no matter what happens now, they're going to have to come up with the dollars. And they just paid for the guy who, the concept is that everybody pays their fair share of the usage of the components as they own it, not as when they sell it. So now if there's a deficit, that's a credit card. They've been charging it up. Sooner or later, it's going to hit the buyer. And so your buyer either needs to know that so they can plan for it, or you negotiate it in your pricing. We don't like to see reduction in pricing, but there's other things you can do. They can pay closing costs. They can, if it's more than what the closing costs are, you can pay closing costs. Plus they can prepay assessments to the association, at which point the buyer would then take the money that they would have been contributing to the reserves, and they would just, the money that they would have been paying for the monthly assessments, put that in the bank, so if a special assessment, or I should say when that special assessment comes about, that they'll have the funds to do that. So there's many creative ways that the real estate agents have been using over the years to satisfy the fact that the debt does not get left for the new buyer. Then sometimes the buyers don't really understand that it is going to come and haunt them. A lady called me the other day that I had done the review on her property when she bought it 6 years ago. Nothing happened in those 6 years, but she lists her property, and within 3 weeks, her association puts out that they needed a $25,000 special assessment per home. So now the value of her property just went down. Well, she's used the property, but that was based on what she bought when she originally got it. That deficit was already there. It just now is coming due because they need to do roofs and siding and a bunch of other stuff. So it's not as easy as just getting a budget and being able to evaluate it. I read the minutes because the minutes do give you information, but sometimes boards give you one-liners. And I don't know about you, but a one-liner I used 5 years ago, I don't remember what the background was on it, why I used it, right? So that's what's happening to a lot of these associations. They're now starting to see where the lenders are not loaning if they're underfunded, that they don't have any place to get the money except from the owners. They can do it, like I said, down and dirty. We need $25,000 and we need it by September 1st, or they can do a loan, at which point the people have to sign up to be able to be on that. And if you do have a special assessment as a listing agent, you must disclose that, and also not the percentage of the funding, but give them the dollar amount, because that will come back to haunt you if you don't. So that's pretty much it as far as the special assessment type issues. We are in budget time again. Assessments that are of a January 1st to December, they're starting to pull in their reserve studies and some of this other information. So you're not going to get a real solid number for next year, but you will be able to see based on the percentage funded if there's going to need to be an increase so that you can disclose that to your buyer. Buyers are buying these things blindly, not understanding that it will come to them sooner or later, either now or 6 years from now, or when they try to sell or refinance. So be conscious of that, because I know we all are aware that we're selling. If it's an investment property, the investor wants to make money, but if it's a home, it has a little more love and attachment to it, and we don't want them to get into something that they're going to be really unhappy about. And we want referrals.
We got lots more questions in here, and I can stay over a little bit if we need to get to all of these questions. Why would a builder choose to build a condo versus a PUD? What are the financial benefits to the builder and or the city?
I love it. Okay. They don't want to build condos because they have a lot of liability. The association can sue them for common area defects. In a planned unit development, the individual owners have to set up a class action suit to sue them. So many years ago, this is one of the things. I had a project, we called it the Gemini project. One side was built by one developer and the other side was built by another developer. And one was a PUD and the other one was a condo. The first one that got built was a condo and they got into a lawsuit. The guy, before he started building the other side, same plans, they look identical, but he realized that these condos were in a lawsuit and that they were getting pulled in on every single thing. So they went and said, well, what's our out? And their attorney said, build a PUD instead. Planned unit development, they own the land as well as the structure. So but 80% of all the new construction is going to be condos because of land usage. You don't have a lot of land that you're going to be able to build sprawling type projects. They're going to go up, not out. So if they have the option and they've got a piece of property and they're building into a townhouse, you'll find that most of the developers now will build it as a planned unit development rather than a condo. But all the new ones that are being built on small sets of land will be condos because of the land usage. Cities want condos. If you can go up with 5 stories, there's a lot more taxes involved they get. So
Okay.
that's pretty much the answer to that.
Regarding special assessments, I think this is interesting. For balcony inspections and repairs, do the owners of ground floor units have to pay and be involved in those assessments, or is it just those above with balconies?
I love that question. I absolutely love that question. Okay. It depends on the governing documents. If they're equally sharing the common areas, then that is what's called restricted common area. And they have to go get an attorney opinion letter based on their governing documents. Some have been successful in only billing out what they have to do for those units that have those balconies. Some of them have not been, and everybody pays equal share. So that will depend on that would be a question to ask if you're going in to purchase or putting a property on the market for sale. Which way did they go? What did they should have an attorney opinion letter the minute they start thinking about doing that inspection. So it definitely depends, legal documents, attorney opinion letter, and how their budget is set up.
All right. Sheila, I'm going to read your question, but let me know if I do this right. I'm probably not going to. If you are the owner of 8 units, but there are 10 owners with an HOA, what are the guidelines?
If you own 8 units in a 10-unit project, you're a developer. If you try to sell even one of those, you will not be able to sell it without going back to the Department of Real Estate and putting together all their budgets, all of their documents and everything. Pretty scary situation, because I did have a guy that bought 5 units and went to sell one, and he got, I think it was a $50,000 penalty for not going to the Department of Real Estate to get his permit. So, and the other thing is that I'll come back to you, Sheila, just hang on a second. The 10 units or the 8 units that he owns, he has full control of the vote. And the other members, they would have to sue for anything that they want to get done. Sheila, the question. Unmute.
This is a very unique development. Each parcel has their own parcel. Each owner is separate. However, they created an HOA for the purpose of a common area for grass and for gardens, whatever. However, as the owner of a parcel going to sell that parcel, I don't have to ask the next parcel owner what they want to do. I can sell my own. The question I have is, what happens when the HOA meets once a year? We check the financials, we pay some things in common like trash and landscape and things like that, but nothing else. So what is our individual parcel responsibility when we sell?
Okay, if you're under the umbrella of a corporation,
No,
so it's an unincorporated association.
absolutely unincorporated.
Are there CC&Rs?
Yes,
Okay, then you're gonna need to get a legal opinion, because as soon as you do CC&Rs, those CC&Rs bind each and every single unit to an association.
I can't.
That association, it would be, this is something that I definitely can give you an opinion, but I can't give you a legal advice. I would say that if I have one other project like that, and their attorney opinion letter basically said, you're an association, you cannot sell one unit if you own 8 of them. You have to go But
Oh, wait a minute, you're
Yeah.
misunderstanding. We're taking the whole individual
Right.
ownership.
and you have individual owners on each one of those
No,
properties.
no, they're rentals. They're all rentals, but it's only gonna be for renters. I'm gonna sell the whole building. I'm gonna send the whole building. I'm not asking permission for the other 8 owners. May I sell it under what terms? Do I have any liability by selling my own building without consulting my HOA?
So here's my recommendation. Sheila, I'm gonna put Jackie's information in the chat box so that you guys can take this offline, because it seems like there's
Yeah, Sheila, you need to get a legal opinion letter from an attorney, because you are under the guise, there are common areas. You do have CCNRs. So call me afterwards. She can put my number in there and you and I can have that conversation.
perfect.
You have another project exactly like that. And as long as you're under the guise and umbrella of an association, you don't have to ask them if you can sell, but you do have to follow those guidelines. So anyway, we'll have that conversation.
Okay.
Thanks, Jackie.
So the HOA packages have become very expensive and the timeframes to get them have become pretty long. Are there limits to these items? Connie, does that mean is there limits to time or how many? Go ahead and unmute.
Yes, time and money.
Hi, Connie.
Hi.
Okay, so the, if it's a self-managed association, they can only charge the cost of reproduction. And they can charge a small record fee at closing called a transfer fee. If it's an association management company, there are no guidelines as to how much they can charge for the documents. And the guidelines of the law says 10-day from the day you ask for the documents till you're supposed to receive them, they have 10 days in which to provide those. Most associations, a lot of the managers have gone to HomeWise and Condo Certs, where the manager is responsible to put the documents into their library. You go online and you punch little buttons telling them what you want. I have not gotten a clean package off of any one of the packages I've gotten off of that, because the managers do not check. There is no quality control done by the board of directors or the management of the product that's being sent out on their behalf. So once they have 10 days, if you're getting them offline, you're getting them much quicker. But most of the association, I mean, we have a department that does that for about a little over 100 associations. And we take less than a week to get them out the door. But sometimes we have to go back to the manager and say, we need minutes for the last 6 months. We need a current balance sheet, because they don't just automatically send that. But nobody's doing that at the Condo Certs or the HomeWise level. They're just they report to the manager. And if the manager puts them on, that's great. If they don't, you get the old package. And then I'll call them and say, well, my client just paid $650 for a set of documents that the budget didn't have half of the disclosure requirement. Well, that's what we have. We can't give you anything else. Fine. Then your buyer has to make a decision about what the risk level is. See, it's not about bringing, the review is basically giving the seller a support system that backs them up as to what they exactly got.
So if I've got a buyer that needs to have the package reviewed and you do that, right? What do you charge for that?
Well, right now we're at $575. That includes a half-hour phone call at the end with you and the clients to go through any questions that they might have. But it's pretty clear because, and the biggest thing is the way we've done it now is we have the first 4 or 5 pages of the report are all the comment sections on each section. So, and insurance is another big issue that comes up around that. So that's what we're doing. The seller should be doing that inspection when they get the documents, because when they hear from me, they get all weirded out. You might not get any more documents, but your buyer's going to have to make a judgment, risk management decision about if this corporation isn't operating under the guise of the law, do I want to be in there? And most of the time they walk through the door and it's been staged and they love it, so they're not gonna go anywhere. And so they buy it and then they get unhappy when they get in there. So that's, the seller is ultimately the responsible party. The association is not a party to the transaction, so they're only responsible to the seller. So that's kind of a hard piece to get aware of. And then the buyers go, oh, well, I'll get it when I get in there. And then they get something that isn't even close to what they thought they were supposed to be getting.
How
So-
much liability does the listing agent have, or the buying agent for that matter?
Well, I know that we all want to be free of any of that. But as a listing agent, you need to know what that percentage funded is and what the dollar amount is, because that's a material fact. Anything that's missing, you should know about, because they're expecting that somebody, if you're ordering them, the title company orders them on you, from your word for your seller. It's very, very convoluted. So everybody gets pulled in and everybody gets to bring their checkbook. So,
So the next question that we have, I think falls on this, is where does that liability fall on the HOA or the seller when the HOA does not disclose on the required statement of fees, and then demand that there's an approved assessment increase, and the board meeting minutes that they did give you never even talked about it?
oh, both of those are good. Okay, so that's kind of a loaded question, but it's a good one. Okay, so ultimately, the disclosure package that you are getting as a selling agent and a buyer's agent, a listing agent and a buyer's agent, is the responsibility of the seller. So if you're the listing agent, your seller is ultimately the responsible party, regardless of anything else. If that package is not complete, which our report tells you, they have no cover or umbrella. There's nothing that protects them. And anything that happens, they can come back to them. I've seen it as much as 4 years later. So the seller is ultimately the responsible party, and knowing what they're passing on should be, but they're on their way out. They've listed that property. They may already be in their new property. They're not really concerned about it, but they are ultimately the responsible party, according to the Davis Sterling. Now, a buyer is responsible when they get those documents to review them. And usually it's 700 pages long. It's all run together, broken down, but all run together, no particular order. And you say to them, I'm so happy we've got a weekend. You have 3 days in which to read and sign off on these contingencies of the documents. They put them on the table, never to look at them. And then they come back after everybody when they move in and find out there's some big issue. So the concept here is that if the seller gets our report, we're their insurance policy, that the association didn't do their job, and that list that comes from our report gets sent back to the association. These are the things that were missing, outdated, or not in compliance with Davis Sterling. Then it's up to the management company to take care of it. If they don't, the seller's off the hook. Because they say, well, I did this report and it said that they were missing things. I sent the list back to the association, still didn't get the documents. Now it's on the association board of directors, not the management company will get pulled in, but ultimately the management company discloses all this stuff on behalf of the board. The board has, most of the time I tell the boards of directors, you need to be getting a copy of what's going out on your behalf to represent your multi-million-dollar corporation and know what it looks like. Are all the pages there? I get stuff all the time with missing pages. Sometimes somebody will go to a scanner and it's a front and back and we only get one side. It's a very one-sided piece of work, right? So ultimately the seller is always responsible. Agents that representing that seller kind of falls into that category because you're not pushing them to get the report. Sometimes my agents are saying, I'm buying the report. I want the protection. And if it protects my seller, I usually will negotiate and I get paid out of escrow or something of that nature. If it's on the buyer side and the buyer buys and gets a surprise, That's a big problem. We just had one that exact same thing happened, $51,000 worth. So when you've got a seller, you say to the seller, give them a brown envelope and say anything, emails or in the mail that you get from your association, I need to get, because that becomes part of our disclosure package. So this guy was really happy. He'd been on the board for 6 months. He knew they were going to do a special assessment. The votes were out. They just had not been counted yet. The day before before they closed, he got a letter from the association. He'd gotten off the board, but he got a letter saying that the special assessment for 51,000 has passed and is due and payable October the 1st. Close the escrow. He never passed that document to the buyer. The buyer moves in and gets that same letter from someone else in the neighborhood and goes back to the listing agent, to his agent, who then had to go back to the listing agent and pull the seller back in. They got into a mediation and they brought their checkbook.
Who
So
did?
the seller and the seller's agent, because the seller's agent should have known that he got a letter. It's very convoluted. You know, I mean, it's like everybody's going to point the finger, and it's sometimes easier to just pay it off. But the seller, that's that one little crack, or a crack between the time that a budget goes out and the time you close escrow, order the documents and close your escrow. Lots can happen. So you've got to say to your seller, make sure I get everything you get from the association from this day forward, so that you can pass it on.
Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Jackie. It's Erica Schumann Fitz.
Hi, Erica.
I'm on my phone, and I'm. How are you, hon? I just want to confirm. So when I'm ordering the HOA docs, I order absolutely everything available, and I have a lot of counterparts that order just the bare minimum package, because that's what their listing agents are requesting. And I'm always saying that's not a good idea. You want to provide everything that you have available just to protect yourself. So after listening to what you're saying, that's 100% correct, right?
Yes, I mean, be on the safe side, but
Sure, but-
the problem that happens is you can order everything online today, and in 2 days, that letter that they got about the special assessment hadn't gotten to condo search, so that you wouldn't have been able to go online and get it. So there are cracks in that, every single way that you look at it. But if you order, here's what you need. And in these documents, that everything should show up. You need articles, bylaws, CC&Rs.
Reserve study, everything.
Well, we're gonna get there. That's the administrative side, and 12 sets of minutes. Newsletters are not
Right.
a required disclosure, but if they've got newsletters, you're gonna get a lot more information out of the newsletters than you do their minutes. Because they give you the story behind the minutes. Then you go, and you get the budget, reserve study, and the budget will have a portion of the reserve study in there, but you want the physical report, because that gives you need a current balance sheet. A current balance sheet currently is not a required disclosure, but how do you have current numbers to evaluate the financial health? So I always ask for that, and then they'll come back, well, that's not a required disclosure. Yes, but your buyer and your seller can ask for anything they want, and the seller can request.
Exactly.
So then
Okay,
you
because the thought
also
behind it
have any
was,
notices that have gone out to the association members within the past year. That also is not a required.
Can you
disclosure.
repeat that one? Can you repeat that one? I didn't hear it.
Yeah, you want any notices that have been delivered to the membership. So that could be a notice of a general meeting, it could be a notice of the assessments not being enough, having to borrow money from the reserves. There's all kinds of things that could be in the notices. Notices, again, are not a required disclosure, but your seller has the right to ask for whatever they want, and a buyer has the right to ask anything that will give them a full picture of what they're buying. Just so-
exactly.
Some of you have heard this story before, but when I was in college, it was in marketing, and I walked into my marketing class the first night of school, And my teacher said, anybody who wants to be a real estate agent, stay. Anybody who doesn't, go to the next class. And 18 of us got our real estate licenses. We went to Anthony's. Our first transaction with our broker, our class teacher, and it was really kind of fun because it was a hands-on situation. We sold 3 duplexes behind Valley Fair. Okay,
Oh, wow.
on a napkin at Stickney's.
That's
So I want you to
hilarious.
see the difference in contrast between what all the disclosures are, and it's the same for HOA disclosures. That's why I stay in this business, is because I am ever-endingly amazed at the lack of disclosure and the responsibility that the board has to look at that package and make, who sends out a set of documents on a multi-million-dollar corporation and the board doesn't know what's going out? I don't understand that, but it's happening. It happens every day. So,
You know what else is common is you get a lot of sellers that don't want to pay for the HOA docs, and they try to piecemeal it together and download what they can from the portal, but then, we have to order the demand, and that's the most expensive piece. And I'm always telling them, you're not doing yourself any favors. We have to have the demand or we can't close escrow. You might as well be guaranteed that you have a full disclosure package, at least what's available to us today.
well,
Because
if
it's
they're
happening
doing
a
it,
lot
yeah,
because they're so expensive.
and I see them doing it piecemeal, if they're doing it piecemeal and you know that, you have them sign off that I prepared this document package. It was not purchased from the association. If you got it from the association, you've got documentation because you got your order form. So you want to know, because the association probably in most instances, their package isn't any better than the one he was able to put together. Because nobody's doing quality control. That's the one thing that when I see, I just wrote an email to a group called Community Association Institute. And they're asking, what things do you think boards of directors need to be aware of? And I said, their disclosure packages, their documents that they're preparing and sending out. Why would you send out documents that are 1976 when the laws have changed 86 times since then?
Right.
And so it's very interesting. I mean, I am currently working on an algorithm that will be able to evaluate associations' levels of compliance with the Davis Sterling, so that it's going to be like a FICO score. And we're still trying to figure out, but it's going to be something that a listing agent could have, and it would go on the listing. This rating on this particular association is X, and if it's below, keep moving. If it's up, and not that they can't bring it up, you do the same thing with your FICO scores, right? So I've been dancing with that for about 1.5 years now. I'm almost to a point where I think I can start using it. I'm going to test it out for a few months. But these are things that nobody really wants to talk about. The board of directors who won't meet. And the situation comes up all the time. Nobody's looking at these documents before they collect your money and walk away with their.
Yeah, and it's getting really expensive.
So that's it. That's my soapbox. Sorry.
With another question, with regard to the turnaround time, and for the 20 years I've been doing this, it's always an argument whether it's 7 to 10 business days, calendar days, what is it?
Well, they should have a resolution. I look at it that it's 10 days. We say that we don't include Sundays or holidays because generally there's nobody working. But Saturday is generally a working day. So the thing is nobody's going to produce a document if they're not in the office. So you have to take that into consideration. So it should be 10 days. And if they have a policy, like our policy says, we do not count these, but we count it from the day that the email comes in for the request. If it's in before noon, it's that day. If it's afternoon, we put it to the next day. So there should be a policy, which they don't normally have. Thinking of it as.
Yeah, there's not.
Yeah, and so,
There's not, because they always, what my experience is, they say it's from the day they get payment. So I'm always in a rush
so
to
payment
get,
is not the guideline.
especially if it's a check.
Yeah, the guideline is the day of request, not the date of payment. They don't have to, what we say is we don't release the documents till we verify payment. That's simple, but it is again, an issue that has been a little bit open-ended, and everybody evaluates it and puts it out the way that they want to. But you, as a real estate agent, when you're asking for it, you can go into the Davis Sterling and it says 10 days. It doesn't say 10 working days. It doesn't say 10 days after payment. It says 10 days. And if we really do try to get it out, so we're always saying that we process in our mind, it's 7 days. So it's out before that 10 days. So, you know, I mean, that's a loose wire.
Okay.
And I got a couple more questions, and then I actually have another class. So let me ask the question about balconies. Is it only wood, or does it also for metal, or does it matter what the material is?
Well, some of these units we're finding are steel buildings, foundations with that. And if the pillars that are holding the decking up are metal, less likely to have to do the inspections. You still have to make sure that the wood on top of the decking is okay, but some of those are cement. So if it's cement, there are less likelihood, but the board of directors should have an investigation of the types of materials that their balconies are connected to the buildings, and then evaluate whether or not they have to go the full bore. What they're really looking for is the wooden decks. And the pillars, that the big beams that go underneath. And so that's what they're really looking for. So,
Okay.
But you know, when in doubt, these boards of directors should be getting experts' opinions and getting a letter on file that says our balconies are steel and cement and our walkways. But what about the railings? If the railings are wood, they should have that portion inspected. Anything that has to do with wood or deteriorating components.
Okay. Is there a list of attorneys that write opinion letters? If so, do you have a range of cost for an opinion letter?
This should be done by the association, and they generally do have an attorney that they work with. So when in doubt, I mean, there's several times when I've made a recommendation in our report that this is a consideration. It would take a legal opinion, and the board may wish to obtain a legal opinion letter. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Again, these are all balancing out for our clients what the risk is going to be for them to purchase in a project with the amenities and the work that needs to be done.
And
So
the
it's
final,
not the association into compliance. It's all about getting that risk management handled.
and the final one, John Hansen wants to know if you're surviving the heat in Texas and when you're coming back to California.
Never, never, never.
Well, John, I miss you. We've known each other many, many years. I'm not coming back to California anytime. Oh, well, I am coming back on a vacation. I'm coming to San Francisco in September. I am going to try to get down to San Jose to see a bunch of people. And I'm loving Texas. How could you not love having all your grandkids and your great grandkids in your front door? I mean,
Absolutely.
they live in the same neighborhood. So I can't go far from that. Yes.
Phone
Sheila.
number, what's your phone number?
Oh,
Here, I'll put it in the chat again.
okay, but it is 408-226-2437. And the heat in Texas, we all have air conditioning, and the humidity is really nice for my skin. And as you can tell, I've gone gray. I used to be a redhead. This is the pandemic.
It looks wonderful.
It looks
Thanks.
great.
And so life is good. All of my grandkids, they took pictures at their front door when they went to school yesterday. But I was fine until I saw my granddaughter who's 4, my great granddaughter who's 4, and the baby who's 2 years old, my last one. And they both had their backpacks because they were going to preschool.
Aw.
That ended it for me. I cried. What can I do?
Could you repeat the phone number, please?
408-226-2437.
Thank you.
And I just put it into
Alright.
chat if you guys want to write that down.
Thank you very much. It's
All
been
right.
exciting, great questions, awesome group. I always love working with you guys.
And we'll definitely have to